again, and welcome back to EDUC367. In the following 3 weeks, we will be covering Chapter 4, Theoretical Perspectives, Past and Present. By theoretical perspectives, we mean theories related to second language acquisition and not first language acquisition. After knowing about the language learning contexts and the different means of teaching and learning second language, let's go into the theories of how second language acquisition happens. First, let's understand what is meant by the word theory. A theory is a set of statements related to a certain natural phenomenon that explain how this phenomenon and why, how this phenomenon happens and why it happens. When we talk about phenomenon, we mean anything related to life, to human existence, and to other creatures, whether plants, animals, etc. So when it comes to language acquisition, we also have certain theories and hypotheses that explain how second language acquisition happens. And we want to distinguish the word hypothesis, which is actually a statement belonging to a certain theory. The theory is a set of statements that builds its explanation on, and a hypothesis is just one statement within the theory, and it makes a prediction about an aspect of the phenomenon. So the objectives of this lesson is to understand second language acquisition. How does it happen? What are theories and views that explain the process, and how are these theories related, and how did they build on each other in order to get to what we know all about second language acquisition nowadays. Therefore, for you as language teachers in the future, by understanding these theories and the hypotheses, you will be able to understand and comprehend the development of your students, and you will be able to enhance your teaching practices in order to make the learning experience more effective. So, in the book there are a lot of theories. However, because of lack of time, we will be covering these 7 ones. Contrastive analysis and error analysis now in week 1. Week 2, the monitor model, also called input hypothesis, information processing or cognitive approach. And finally, we have 3 hypotheses related to processing: the interaction hypothesis, the comprehensible output hypothesis, and finally the input processing hypothesis. Sorry for the ambulance sounds if you heard them. Alright, so let's begin with contrastive analysis. What do you mean by contrastive analysis, and how is it related to second language acquisition? Contrastive analysis approach is based on the contrastive analysis hypothesis, which I will be explaining in a minute. First, you should know about the approach that it is a structuralist view starting in the 1950s and 1960s. One of its premises, the basic components of the view, is that emphasis on language lies on structures and forms. This is why it's called structuralist. So the linguists focus on the structures and forms of languages, and they believe that comprehension precedes production. Why and how? The CAH hypothesis predicts, let's focus here on the word predicts, that wherever 2 languages, L1 and L2, have similarities, learning would be easy, and wherever there are differences in the structures of the 2 languages, there will be a difficulty. To begin with, let's understand how this theory or approach started. During that period, 1950s, in psychology, behaviorists were the most dominant. We talked about behaviorism before. You had the psychologist B.F. Skinner, who talked about classical conditioning and operant conditioning when it comes to first language acquisition. Now we will relate this to second language acquisition. According to the behaviorist view, L2 learning, just like any other kind of learning, involves 3 steps. When we say other kind of learning, let me give you examples. Learning to walk, learning to cook a certain meal, learning, let's say, to play a certain musical instrument, learning to tie your shoes, learning to comb your hair, learning to wear your clothes, learning, I don't know, to put nail polish on. All of these require these steps according to behaviorists. Imitation, doing like the other person, that is observing and imitating. Repetition, and finally reinforcement, that asserts, and this happens after a lot of practice. So these actions, when it comes to language learning, enable learners to develop habits of the L2. What do you mean by habits? They are the actions that you as a learner do, imitation, repetition, reinforcement, in order to acquire the language. And the process of learning, whether it's L1 or L2, was considered to be the establishment of habits through, you remember, these stimulus-response connections. Example, let's take a language like Turkish, which I know some of you love and want to learn. Let's say you're watching a Turkish movie or a show, and then you hear Günaydın a lot. Let's say you're not reading Sabah al-Khair, okay, as translation, and then you start repeating it and saying it Günaydın. Now you know the pronunciation of it. At some point, if someone replies to you or interacts with the word Günaydın, it will be reinforced in your lexicon. This is what we mean by the stimulus-response connections. So when learning an L2, the learner already has a well-established linguistic system, the system of the L1. And this linguistic system will allow the habits of the L2 to be built. Therefore, new L2 habits replace those of L1 when a person is learning a second language. That is, instead of updating, repeating, and reinforcing L1, they are doing these steps for L2. According to behaviorist views, first language acquisition, second language acquisition are fundamentally, basically the same processes, the same steps happen. Based on that, what are the CA approach objectives? To understand the objectives, we should understand the CAH, the hypothesis, which asserts that there's something called L1 interference, which you already know about happening. And this is what constitutes obstacles in L2 learning. It's language interference when L1 affects L2 acquisition. As a result, what did the CA linguists do? They conducted structural analysis of the first language of a certain person and the target language. Notice that these analyses are specific to certain languages. So they would study an Arab who wants to learn English, or let's say an English person wanting to study Chinese. So they did these analyses and determined areas of linguistic contrast. What we mean here is, linguistically speaking, how are these two languages different when it comes to structures and to forms. Therefore, this allows them to predict the areas of difficulty and the areas of ease when it comes to language acquisition. As a result, areas of contrast cause difficulty in learning, while areas of similarities cause easy learning. We will see examples later. Therefore, learners are likely to make errors when there are structures that are different, and they are less likely to make errors in forms or structures that are similar. We talked about this when we talked about transfer before. Let's look at these examples. In Arabic, we say هذه طفلة جميلة. If I want to say this sentence in English, I would say this is a beautiful girl, and in French, c'est une belle fille. Examining these forms here, we have a lot of examples in just this sentence. Okay, هذه, this, and ce, right? So, or whatever. What we have here is verb to be is, and verb at, which is verb to be in French. However, in Arabic we don't have verb to be, so this is an area of contrast, so it might be difficult for a learner of Arabic. Another thing is we use the adjective in English and French in these cases. The adjective is before the modified noun. While in Arabic, the adjective jamila came after the verb طفلة. And also we have the gender, the feminine form ta marbuta following this. This feature is absent in English and French, so it's also an area of contrast. Therefore, when it comes to these structures, there's a difference between Arabic and English and French. However, if we compare English and French in these forms, they are similar, so it's easier for them to learn this form, but for Arabs, learning these forms would be more difficult. This is the point here. Therefore, let's say there's an Arab who wants to speak English and is learning English. He wants to say هذه طفلة جميلة in English, and he would say it this way: this girl beautiful. Why? There's no verb to be, because in Arabic we don't have verb to be, and he put the adjective after girl because this is how we do it in Arabic. Therefore, he made an error, and the cause here is the area of contrast. Another example is ذهب الولد إلى المدرسة. I did not choose أكل الولد التفاحة. Here, if I want to translate it in English, it would be the boy went to school, and in French it would be le garçon est allé à l'école. Let's see, the similarities here lie in إلى المدرسة, to school, à l'école. However, if you look at the Arabic version, we started with the verb ذهب, okay? While in English we start with the boy and then the verb went, and in French le garçon and then est allé, the verb. In Arabic, which is special about Arabic, is that it has two forms of sentences. We have the nominal beginning with a noun, جملة اسمية, and we have the verbal, which is جملة فعلية beginning with a verb. So here this is an area of contrast. However, in Arabic we do have the nominal form where you have where you begin with a noun and then the verb. Therefore, if someone is learning Arabic, let's say an English or French person learning Arabic wants to say this word in Arabic, it would not be difficult for them. They would say it الولد ذهب إلى المدرسة, and it would still be correct in this case. Subject, verb, and then the prepositional phrase إلى المدرسة. Here we have an area of similarity, and this is not difficult for learners of Arabic to understand. Last, let's look at this word أحبك or أحبك. We have this sentence in one word. However, when it comes to English, we say it I love you, subject, verb, and object. In contrast, when it comes to French, we say je t'aime. We have the subject and then the object and then the verb. Unlike English and unlike Arabic, three different forms in the three sentences. And here we have areas of contrast, and this might cause errors. So here, let's say someone who's Arab or English trying to say the phrase أحبك or I love you in French, they might do this error of saying j'aime toi or j'aime tu, translating it as a word for word, not comprehending the structure. Therefore, here there is an error because of the contrast between the structures here and there. I will pause here now, and we will continue in the next part.